Well, folks, this is According to Callus. It is a Monday. It is episode 101. I just don't have the intro music. I am so sorry. I am working on it, though. I have a couple of them that I'll be trying later this week. So, because of that, we're going to entitle today's episode Messy Monday. And what are we going to cover? We're going to relate what I heard at the tail end of last week on Chris Ann Hall's show. We're going to talk about restrictions. We're going to talk about political prisoners. We're going to talk about what those local orders might be coming down the pike. And the death of liberty. I'm not one that's a big fan of hyperbole, but how else would you describe what we're facing straight on? If that sounds in the least bit interesting, come and join me on the podcast. I'll see you on the other side. Well, folks, that is the double intro. The video is up. The audio is recording, or you're actually listening to it at this point. I'm going to try out a couple different intro songs later on this week, but for tonight we're just going to talk about what's been going on. So, the tail end of last week, I listened to Chris Ann Hall's show. If you don't listen, you really need to check it out. It's KRISANNEHALL. Episode 1362. That'd be 1362. They highlight the egregious abuse of power by the Capitol Police and what we get to look forward to as they attempt to expand the Capitol Police far beyond the Capitol. And if that doesn't concern you, perhaps after listening to this episode, you may just change your mind. Why do I say this? Oh, well, while the restrictions are likely to increase here shortly, as in the next week or two, and while the feds are going to use everything they have in their power to manipulate, mandate, and quite frankly, just make our lives difficult, the fact of the matter still remains is some states are better than others. Some states at least pretend to care about our liberty more than others. I just don't know what to say. I don't know how to explain it any better. I know that I'm not going to convince most people. I know that there are some people that just don't wish to be made awake. I know there are some people that just think that they're living the best of all possible worlds. And I know some people that just think if we will just do this one thing, everything will magically be better, including bring back President Trump. No, that's not how it works. That's not the world we live in. There is one solution, but until that guy comes riding down from heaven on a white horse, we have to occupy. We have to stand firm. We have a job to do. So in the face of all of that, I say beware the new restrictions. We don't know exactly what they're going to be, but I can tell you right now, hospitals are ratcheting down, or ratcheting up if you prefer, the requirements for workers to go in. The people that were heroes a year ago are now not. Those of us who have been working this whole time, basically taking some risks, but doing the best we can to manage with the situation that we're in, now keep hearing about, well, maybe you need to mask, maybe you need to do this, maybe you need to do that, maybe you have to have this, maybe you have to have that, maybe this emergency authorized use product will somehow make you safe, only then it doesn't. And then even if you have it, it may not. You still have to mask. Their story keeps changing. I've covered this. It's all a cover for the restrictions that they want to bring about. Now I realize some of you are thinking, oh, Steve, man, you're going over into that woo-woo land. You're going into the conspiracy corner. You're not turning into that guy from Austin, are you? No, not at all. I'm just seeing this stuff. we've been warned. There have been plenty of people that were not, Mr. Jones, that have said this is what's coming. They've said, pay attention, look at these things, be aware. And I can't help but wonder, what's it going to take? What has to happen before you just say no? I don't know what else to say about that. I just don't know what else to say. If Chris Ann Hall can't open you up to the possibility that the soft totalitarianism that we've been living under is slowly ratcheting up to be full-on hard totalitarianism in that episode of 1362, I doubt that I'm going to be able to tell you anything that's going to convince you. The mere fact that we essentially have political prisoners now in this country is just dumbfounding to me. A mere 6 years ago, we had a criminal running for president who was married to a criminal, and they were pounding on the desk just a few years earlier how that to challenge your government, to question the authority, to oppose government actions was the height of patriotism, was being a good American. And now, sadly, that they've reasserted some power, that's all gone. There's no concern for those that want to protest. There's no concern for those that don't feel that the government's doing the right thing. Oh, no, because they know better than all of us. Now, some would call it puritanical, some would call it tyrannical, some would call it socialism. It doesn't really matter. It's just the other boot on your neck. Wake up, wake up, wake up. We have 600 people approximately that are locked up, and they've been locked up for 6 months. The level of abuse they may or may not have had is irrelevant. They can't see their attorneys. They can't see their families. They're being held without being charged, or at least not real charges. Certainly, the hold is not merited by the charges that they have put against them. And if that's not political in nature, I don't know what is. And now suddenly, Congress, which has largely been asleep at the switch for the last 20 or 30 years, decides that they want to expand authority for the Capitol Police. They want to expand authority of the alphabet soup agencies. They want to have the federal government run roughshod over all the states and the counties and the cities. And why? To stamp out anybody that might just say no. I mean, what else could it be? Are they really concerned about a few protesters that orderly were creating mischief inside the city hall that we call the Capitol building? When they turned a blind eye and cheered the bad behavior that was going on in Portland, Seattle, Minneapolis. For years, protesters were firebombing, torching, protesting, staging sit-ins, graffitiing. That was all fine. That was all something to be celebrated. Yet, hey, a couple guys, they went in, they were a little disorderly inside of a building that they were invited in by the private security that was there. Oh, that's right, they're Capitol Police. Whatever. Does anybody actually believe this narrative anymore? Does anybody actually believe anything they see on the news anymore? Does anybody actually believe the narrative? Sadly, yes. The question is answered yes. The vast majority of the general public still take it hook, line, and sinker. And they want us all to just comply. If we just go along to get along, it'll all be over. And that's on both sides of the aisle. I mean, the Republicans are just as bad. They just pick and choose which things they want to cave in on. They just pick and choose the things that they're not interested in defending liberty on. Whereas the Democrats, they did away with all pretense of giving a rat's behind about liberty or personal property or personal rights. Unless, of course, you want to kill your baby. Then they'll protect that all day long. Murder before you're born, perfectly legit. But hey, you looked at that guy wrong. That's a microaggression. We need to lock you up. It's not the way the world's supposed to work. It's not the way things ought to be. Yet that's where we are, and we continue to do nothing about it. The question is what do you do? We've talked about this, right? There's several books on the subject. There's several articles on it. There's radio programs on it. We all know what needs to be done. We just need to not comply. We need to change our tune locally. We need to reassert our authority. Now, I'm in Collin County, and I've said this time and time again. We probably have the best county government in the country. And I'm thrilled to death. Notwithstanding, Fire Finley, that we have a couple of, shall we say, rogue individuals, Fire Finley, that need to be dealt with in the next election cycle, Fire Finley. But in the local level, we're just a basket case. I mean, Allen, that's the town directly south of me, appears to have maybe turned the corner. Plano, they're at a standstill now. I mean, they rolled the dice big and they didn't win. It's disappointing. And they've already started to repeal the reforms that were put in under the last term because, well, they can and nobody can stop them. Isn't that special? Don't you just like it when the oligarch reasserts its control over your city? And then McKinney and Frisco. Oh, my word. These were beautiful, nice towns just as little as 10 years ago. And, I know in Frisco they call them the cabal, and, okay, fine. I don't want to go down that road. But the oligarch is alive and present. You can call it the old boys network. You can call it the whatever you want. But the fix is in. The powers that be control both of those city halls and apparently the school boards. I mean, when you look at what Frisco ISD is getting ready to do, oh my word, what in the world are we living in? You got to go look it up if you're interested, because I'm not going to waste time going over all that nonsense. And then at least in McKinney ISD, we have got a couple of sensible people on there that actually want to look at what's been done. And is it working? And perhaps we should try something different. That brings us directly to local orders, right? So I don't expect it's going to be very long before many of the major corporations are going to start enforcing some variation of lockdown or mask mandates. Oh, it'll be a private company. So, you conservatives, you just need to go ahead and comply because the private company told you to. Never mind they're being coerced by some form of government. Never mind that, it's a couple of key lefties in positions of power that are shoving down their demands upon us. Never mind that it's, that Yankee Puritanism that forces what's best for us upon us. No. Just go along. Accept the fascism. Accept the corporate oligarchy. Accept what is being put upon you. Just don't worry about it. It's for your own good. It reminds me, those of you that might be a little bit younger than I might still remember the original Men in Black movie. Yes, with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones, which honestly is probably one of the better movies that I saw from that time period. And actually, what's funny is my best friend and I, after we came out of that movie, he actually complimented it and said it was a good movie. And at the time, I turned to my friend and I'm like, wow, I think that's the only movie we've ever come out of, and you legitimately complimented it. Tobias, that's you, buddy. Yeah, so, but the theme song talks about, don't worry, it's for your own protection. I can't think of a better way to explain what's going on. We see stuff in front of us and they come and tell us something completely different than what we've observed with our own eyes. But they say, don't worry, it's for your own protection. And then, of course, most people just go along with it. So I imagine, and I imagine this is not a stretch, but I imagine what they've pulled in New York, right? What they've pulled in New York City is going to be rolled out nationwide here in the next couple of weeks. Of course, with full support of the feds, with full support of most of the states, and it's going to get to the state of Texas. Now, Governor Greg, right, the pusillanimous man that he has shown himself to be, is up for re-election.
So he may have found his spine now. He may decide, well, no, we're not going to lock down this time. Or, yeah, I know, but, man, the political pressure is just on me real bad. I'm going to have to be tough. Yes, Governor Greg, this is when it matters. Even though I've endorsed your primary opponent, even though I support your primary opponent, I will tell you flat out, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you show what kind of man you are. This is where you say, no. The border is where the feds stop. This is the sovereign state of Texas, and this is what we're going to do here. We don't recognize your authority because we didn't give it to you. That's going to mean that Lieutenant Dan's going to have to step up too. Lieutenant Dan's going to have his back, but Lieutenant Dan, man, that's wishful thinking, but hey, that's what we got. Maybe he'll show up and do the job. At least our Attorney General has got some cojones, right? Perhaps a couple more lawsuits fired off might buy us a little protection, might back them off just a little bit. I mean, it is wishful thinking. After all, you don't take GM to court in the court that GM pays for when they pay for the judge, whether they pay for the attorney, and expect to get a fair hearing. But at least maybe it'll slow things down. I mean, the same courts that just determined some wacky stuff in the last 2 weeks, whatever. It's just an opinion. Yes, and it's unenforceable if the state tells them to go pound sand. The state of Texas has the opportunity to lead by example. Instead of being a Johnny-come-lately, or let's follow the lady in South Dakota, who apparently had to be basically forced into taking that stance. I'll give credit where credit's due. She did do that when she had her hands forced, but she wanted to knuckle under right away too. And that gave Governor DeSantis the grit to finally say enough's enough, we're done. And then, of course, Governor Greg decided, well, I'll jump up on this bandwagon. I mean, a lady from South Dakota and the other guy from Florida could do it, so certainly maybe I can do it too. Yeah, not impressive. Nevertheless, local orders, what do? You don't comply. And just in case anybody's wondering, if the mayor, bless his heart, decides to issue some kind of decree telling me I got to mask up or I got to do this or I got to do that, I'm not going to bother replying. I'm just not going to comply. Oh, and if Officer Friendly and friends decide to arrest me, and they may just find me, they may slap me on the wrist, whatever. I'm prepared to go on that hill. And whatever happens, it won't be because I didn't stand. What I need, what I'm asking for, what I want is a few thousand other people to do the same thing. Now look, hey, if you're immunocompromised or you take care of a parent that's immunocompromised or your children are, yes, then you need to do what you think is best for your family. Absolutely. Now, if that means you stay home, fine. That means you go and take some emergency use authorized potion, okay, go for it. If that means you go take the J&J vaccine, then by all means, go do that. That's what's best for you and your family. You've made that choice for your family and your body. Everybody should be granted that same right. In this country, we're perfectly fine for 50% of our population making a decision whether or not a baby can be born. Certainly, we ought to be all right for 30% of that population saying, yeah, I really don't want to participate in this medical experiment. Oh, what, Stephen? What if the FDA approves? Yeah, about that. Is the FDA part of the government or run by government agency? I seem to remember it is. I seem to remember that they all take orders just like everybody else. I seem to remember that they get their payola from Big Pharma. I seem to remember they have a vested interest in doing specific things at a specific time. I'm just saying, I'm not willing to buy their story. I don't know. I could be wrong, and I highly encourage you. You should do your own research. You should make your own decision for you and your family. But if those things are supposedly working, then you doing them will protect you and your family. Just like some friends of mine carry firearms, they don't demand you carry a firearm because they're there to protect them and their family. Maybe they just think that if somebody is not capable of taking care of their family in the same way, they ought to do it a different way. Or maybe they just respect the fact that you have an opinion that's different than theirs. Or maybe they accept the fact that this is still Texas, and in the Republic of Texas, we still recommend and recognize that you utilize your own liberty at your own discretion. Perhaps when it comes to those local orders, we just need to remind those local officials that they don't have authority over my body, my family, my house. Now, hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully we won't have a replay of what we had last year. But I won't hold my breath. I don't expect you will be either. All this boils down to is we're watching the slow strangulation of liberty. Drip by drip, step by step, they extinguish what remains of the great republic, of the state of Texas, of the liberty that once was cherished by all Texans, by all Americans. The sad fact is that the government schools have been teaching our children, indoctrinating our children to not respect liberty, to not demand liberty, to not recognize that people have individual rights and they're subject to protection by government, but not granted by government. That those individual rights precede government, and the government was created to protect those individual rights. We don't teach civics, and I even remarked earlier this last week that a guy named Zappa gets it. So if you are, I don't know, on the bottom half of the bell curve, and you disregard what I think or say, that's fine. But if some dude named Zappa gets it, you ought to be able to figure it out. They don't teach civics. They don't want you to know what the rules are for government, because if you don't know what the rules of the game are, they can do whatever the heck they want. And how are you to know any better? How are you to stop them? And how are you to prevent them from stomping out the flame of liberty? Now, whether it's you get involved, great. Whether it's you just say no, great. Whether it's you decide, you know what? Enough of this. I'm going to teach my children or my grandchildren in my own home, and I'm going to go invest in some kind of curriculum that's not statist in nature. Great. Awesome. There are plenty of good pro-liberty concepts out there, including, but not limited to, the Ron Paul curriculum. And for those of you who don't know who that is, it's actually prefaced the great Ron Paul, former congressman and guy that spent the better part of 8 years of his life running for president just so he could teach people and reinforce the ideas of individual liberty and the value freedom. If that wasn't enough, there are those of us little small peas out in the rest of the country that heard that. They were charged up by it. They were enthusiastic about it and were motivated to get off our duffs and do just a little bit more. Just to take a little bit more risk. To put in just a little bit more effort. And we're not going away. In fact, one of my major influences, one of the guys I think super highly of, a guy by the name of Tom Woods, I've referenced him at least once before. he's been in the hospital, and I think he's getting on the better side now. But he sent out a message that people were basically mocking the idea that he might be dead. And my response was going to be, then you just tell them what Obi-Wan told Darth Vader. You can strike me down, but I'm just going to come back even more powerful than ever. And yes, it's been a long time since I saw Star Wars, and I realize it probably predates several of you. Point is also put in the movie V for Vendetta, ideas don't die. You can kill a man, but you can't kill an idea. And the idea of liberty and freedom marches on. Just because half of our country was subjugated by the other half under a military dictatorship in a war that ostensibly was to end enslavement of a percentage of the population, somewhere between 12 and 15%, depending on whose number you want to look at. It doesn't change the fact that they just changed the form of that slavery. They altered the avenue in which it was come about. And just because you're not 100% enslaved doesn't mean you can't be 20, 30, 50% enslaved. At what point do you recognize your slavery and your chains for what they are? And if you can't leave your own house without putting something over your face, how is that any different than the nonsense that goes on in the Middle East that we were all supposedly aghast about a little over 20 years ago? I suggest to you that tyranny takes on many forms, but tyranny never, ever stops. Whether it takes the form of a judge that usurps authority that he was never granted, whether it takes the form of a Congress that ignores the authorities that they did have granted to take abuse of authorities that they were never granted, or whether it's an executive that just does whatever the heck they want because nobody will rein them in. I can't tell you how disappointed I am in the country that I call home. I went to Texas because I honestly believed in my heart that we would put up a much stronger fight here and we were more fit for battle here. And I got to tell you, the left has successfully been hollowing out an entire couple of generations of people here. And if that doesn't cause you for pause, I don't know what will. That just means we have to redouble our efforts. We have to take the message out there. We have to break the indoctrination, break the mold which those young people have been brought up under. Yes, with liberty comes responsibility. Yes, because freedom plus responsibility is liberty. Freedom without responsibility is just debauchery. I know Chris Ann Hall and her husband, JC, they have a phrase that basically spells that out exactly what it is. And at the moment, I just can't think of it. And I'm not going to take the break in this podcast and go look it up. But the idea is that just because you're free to do something doesn't mean it's a good thing to do it. Doesn't mean that all things being permissible means that all things are profitable. And honestly, that is a paraphrase of St. Paul from the Holy Scriptures, for those of you that don't know that. Liberty as we know it would not exist without Christianity. Has Christianity done things wrong in the past? Absolutely. Does Christianity get some things wrong now and then? Yes. Does that mean Christianity's wrong? No. Does that mean that Christianity needs to go away? Absolutely not. What it means is it's practiced by people that are fallen and they make mistakes. And you should not judge Christ by Christians. That doesn't mean you should judge liberty by the way it's currently practiced in our country, because it's imperfect and it's broken. And the only way it gets better is if we put in the effort to make it better. With that, this is According to Callus. I will see you on the other side.